At his flashy product launch, my daughter's boyfriend smirked and called me a dinosaur librarian, and his investors laughed like I was already irrelevant. I didn't argue, I didn't defend myself. I just smiled and walked away. That night, I went home and quietly followed the trail he thought no one could see. Every line of his code started telling a very different story. Within days, his $3.2 million startup began to unravel. And when it finally collapsed, they all realized who they should have been afraid of. Before I continue with this story, I need you to understand something. By the time I walked out of that gleaming conference room with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Austin, I already knew exactly how I was going to dismantle everything Marcus Webb had built on stolen code. What I didn't know was whether my daughter would ever forgive me for it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is David Harper. I'm 62 years old, and for the past 37 years, I've been a research librarian at the Austin Public Library Central Branch. Before that, I spent 4 years getting my master's in library and information science. And before that, I was one of those kids who actually enjoyed organizing things. My childhood bedroom had a card catalog system for my comic books. Yes, I was that kind of kid. People hear the word librarian and they immediately picture someone shushing teenagers and stamping due dates on the back of paperbacks. That's fine. I stopped correcting people's assumptions about my job sometime around 1995. The truth is that modern research librarianship is as much about database architecture, digital archives, and information systems as it is about physical books. I've spent the last 2 decades helping researchers, graduate students, and even tech entrepreneurs navigate complex information networks, trace citation trails, and verify sources. I've taught myself Python, SQL, and enough JavaScript to be dangerous. I archive open-source projects in our digital collection. I understand GitHub better than most people half my age. But none of that matters when you're standing next to your daughter's boyfriend at his company's product launch party, and he introduces you to his investors as Sarah's dad. Marcus would say with a smirk that the librarian still thinks card catalogs are cutting-edge technology. The laughter that followed wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was watching my daughter Sarah, my brilliant 28-year-old daughter who works in digital marketing, force a smile and change the subject instead of defending me. Let me back up 6 months. Sarah met Marcus Webb at a tech networking event in January. She was there representing her marketing firm, and he was pitching his startup, something called Velocity Analytics. By February, they were dating. By March, she'd moved into his downtown loft. By April, I was meeting him for the first time at a family dinner. Marcus was everything I wasn't. He was 32 years old, had a Stanford MBA, drove a Tesla, and wore expensive sneakers that somehow cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. He had that particular brand of confidence that comes from never being told no, from growing up in Palo Alto with venture capitalist parents and attending the right schools with the right connections. So David, he said at that first dinner, cutting into his steak with a kind of precision that felt aggressive. Sarah tells me you work at the library. That's nice. Do you enjoy it? The way he said library made it sound quaint, like I'd told him I made buggy whips for a living. I do, I said. 37 years and counting. Wow, same place the whole time, he replied, exchanging a glance with Sarah. That's really stable. I don't think I could stay anywhere that long. I get restless, you know. Always looking for the next challenge, the next disruption. Sarah squeezed his hand and added that Marcus had just raised his Series A for $3.2 million. Congratulations, I said, and I meant it. I'm not one of those people who resent success. I asked him what Velocity Analytics actually did. His eyes lit up the way they always did when someone asked about his company. For the next 20 minutes, he explained how his platform used machine learning to analyze customer behavior patterns and predict purchasing decisions. It would revolutionize e-commerce. He said it was going to change everything. I listened, nodded, and asked questions. Some of what he described sounded familiar, like I'd read about similar approaches in the tech journals we subscribed to at the library, but I couldn't place it exactly. When dinner ended, Marcus shook my hand and told me it was good to meet me. He told me I should come by the office sometime to see what real innovation looks like. Sarah didn't say anything in the car ride home, and I didn't ask. Over the next few months, I saw them occasionally, always at their convenience, always briefly. Marcus was busy and Sarah was busy. They were building something, she said. I needed to understand that. I did understand. I'd raised her by myself after her mother passed when Sarah was 12. I understood about building things, about sacrifice, and about working towards something bigger than yourself. What I didn't understand was why my daughter was slowly disappearing. She used to call me every Sunday. Then it became every other Sunday. Then it became text messages with apologetic emojis. When we did talk, Marcus was always there in the background, or she was distracted, or she had to go because they had dinner plans with investors. You don't like him, she said to me once in late July when I'd expressed concern that I hadn't seen her in 3 weeks. I didn't say that, I replied. You don't have to say it, Dad, I can tell, she said. I told her I just missed her, but she told me that Marcus says I'm threatened by successful people and that it's a generational thing. I let that one go. Picking that fight wouldn't bring her back. Then came the invitation. Velocity Analytics product launch celebration, read the sleek black card that arrived in my mailbox in mid-September. Join us for an evening of innovation as we unveil the future of e-commerce analytics. Sarah called the day after I received it. You're coming, right? It's really important to Marcus that you're there. He wants to show you what he's built. Something in her voice made me say yes, even though I knew it was probably a mistake. The launch event was held at one of those modern event spaces in downtown Austin. All exposed brick and Edison bulbs and craft cocktails with names like the Disruptor and Pivot Point. I wore the only suit I owned, the one I'd bought for Sarah's college graduation. I felt immediately out of place among the skinny jeans and designer blazers. Sarah found me near the entrance. She looked beautiful in a black dress I'd never seen before. Her hair was styled in a way that made her look older, more polished, and less like my daughter. Dad, you made it. She kissed my cheek, but her attention was already elsewhere, scanning the room. Marcus is doing the presentation in 20 minutes, she said. There are some investors I need to talk to first, but afterward we'll catch up. She disappeared into the crowd before I could respond. I found a spot near the back, nursing a beer and watching the tech crowd network. They all seemed to know each other, throwing around terms like growth hacking and user acquisition and burn rate. I felt like an anthropologist studying a foreign culture. Then Marcus took the stage. He was good at this, I'll give him that. He commanded the room with easy charisma, making jokes that landed and building anticipation. His presentation was slick, professionally designed, and full of graphs, projections, and testimonials from beta users. Velocity Analytics, he announced, represents a fundamental breakthrough in predictive consumer modeling. Our proprietary algorithm analyzes 17,000 unique data points per user, creating behavioral fingerprints that can predict purchasing decisions with 93% accuracy. The room applauded. I watched Sarah near the front, beaming with pride. Marcus continued, clicking through slides that showed the platform's dashboard, its features, and its integrations. Something about it nagged at me, a feeling I couldn't quite name, like déjà vu, but more specific. We built this from the ground up, Marcus said, his voice rising with conviction. Every line of code was written by our core team, and every algorithm was optimized for performance. This isn't standing on the shoulders of giants. This is innovation from first principles. That is when I placed it. 6 months ago, maybe 7, a graduate student working on her dissertation had asked me to help her track down documentation for an open-source project called Open Commerce Insights. It was a machine learning framework for e-commerce analytics built collaboratively by developers across 3 continents. Beautiful code, elegant architecture, and released under the GPL license, which meant anyone could use it, modify it, and build on it as long as they released their modifications under the same open license and gave proper attribution. I'd helped her find the archived documentation and had even skimmed through some of the technical specs myself because I found it interesting. The architecture Marcus was describing, the 17,000 data points, even the phrase behavioral fingerprints, it was all there in Open Commerce Insights. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe Velocity Analytics had licensed it properly. Or maybe I was misremembering. I pulled out my phone and started searching discreetly. The Open Commerce Insights GitHub repository was still active. The last commit had been 3 months ago. I scrolled through the documentation and there it was. The same architectural approach, the same technical methodology, even some of the same language Marcus had used in his presentation. My hands were shaking slightly as I checked the license. GPLv3. Very clear terms, very specific requirements about attribution and sharing modifications. I looked up at Marcus, who was now taking questions from investors, confidently fielding inquiries about scalability and competitive advantages and intellectual property protection. Our code is completely proprietary, he said in response to one question. We filed for patents on 17 separate algorithmic innovations. The room broke into applause again. Sarah was recording him on her phone. She was the proud girlfriend capturing her boyfriend's moment of triumph. I slipped out before the presentation ended. I needed air. I needed to think. Outside, I stood on the sidewalk and stared at my phone, refreshing the GitHub page like it might tell me I'd been mistaken. But the code was right there, open source, GPL licensed. And unless Marcus had somehow independently invented an identical system with identical architecture and identical terminology, he'd taken it without attribution, claimed it as proprietary innovation, and was now raising money on that claim. Dad? I turned. Sarah had followed me outside, concern etched on her face. Are you okay? You left in the middle of Marcus's Q&A. I told her I was fine and just needed some air. She studied me with the expression she'd had since she was a child, the one that meant she knew I was lying. You hate it, she said. You hate him, and you hate this whole thing. I told her I didn't hate anything. Then why did you leave? She asked. This is the biggest night of Marcus's life, and you couldn't even stay for the whole presentation. I wanted to tell her right then, standing on that sidewalk with the Texas heat still radiating from the pavement even though the sun had set. I wanted to explain what I'd found, but I could see in her eyes that she wouldn't believe me. She'd think I was making excuses, finding reasons to dislike him, and trying to sabotage her happiness. I'm sorry, I said instead. You're right. I should go back inside. No, she said, crossing her arms. Marcus was right about you. You can't handle that someone from my generation is actually succeeding. You spent 37 years in the same building, stamping books and alphabetizing shelves, and you can't stand that Marcus built something real in less time than you've been at the same desk. Each word landed like a physical blow. I told her that wasn't fair, but she wasn't listening. Marcus has $3.2 million in funding, she said. He's creating jobs. He's innovating. What have you ever built, Dad? I could have said a lot of things. I could have told her about the digital archive system I designed that was now used by 17 libraries across Texas. I could have told her about the grant proposal I'd written that brought internet access to underserved communities. I could have told her about the countless students and researchers and entrepreneurs I'd helped over 3 decades. Instead, I just told her she should get back inside because Marcus would be wondering where she was. She looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something in her face that hurt more than her words. Disappointment. Yeah, she said finally. I should. She went back inside. I went in my car, but I didn't go home. I drove to the library. I had keys, obviously. The building was empty this time of night, just the security lights and the familiar smell of paper and possibility. I went to my office, powered up my computer, and started digging. Research is what I do. It's what I've always done. And when you know where to look, when you understand how information is connected and referenced and built upon itself, you can trace almost anything back to its source. I started with the Open Commerce Insights repository. I cloned it locally and began examining the code structure. Then I found the Velocity Analytics website and started analyzing every technical detail Marcus had made public. Blog posts, documentation, and that demo video on their landing page. By 2 o'clock in the morning, I had 43 separate instances where Velocity Analytics implementation matched Open Commerce Insights exactly. Not just similar, but identical variable names, comment structures, and even the spacing and indentation patterns. Marcus hadn't just been inspired by Open Commerce Insights. He'd taken it, stripped out the attribution, rebranded it, and claimed it as his own proprietary innovation. I should have been triumphant. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt sick because I knew what I had to do, and I knew what it would cost me. I spent the next 3 days verifying everything. I'm methodical like that, trained to check sources and cross-reference claims. I reached out to one of the core Open Commerce Insights developers, a woman named Patricia Chan who taught at Carnegie Mellon. I explained what I'd found and sent her the evidence. Her response came back within an hour. "This is a blatant GPL violation," she wrote. "We need to take action." She put me in touch with 2 other developers and a lawyer who specialized in open source licensing. They were grateful, angry, and determined. They'd spent 3 years building open commerce insights as a gift to the community, and someone had taken it, monetized it, and was now raising millions on the theft. "We'll send a cease and desist first," the lawyer explained on our conference call. "We will give him a chance to make it right. If he refuses, we file suit and contact his investors." I asked how long it would be until his investors knew. If he doesn't comply with the cease and desist, the lawyer said it would be 3, maybe 4 days. News travels fast in the tech world, especially news about intellectual property theft. I hung up and stared at my phone. I had a choice here. I could still walk away and pretend I'd never noticed the similarities. I could let Marcus build his company on stolen code. It would collapse eventually, these things always do, but maybe not for years. Maybe long enough for Sarah to realize who he really was on her own terms. Or I could do what I knew was right and lose my daughter in the process. The choice should have been easy, but it wasn't. That night, Sarah called. It was the first time in 2 weeks she'd initiated contact. "Dad, I want to apologize," she said. "I was really harsh the other night. Marcus said I should call you." I asked if Marcus really said that. "Yeah," she replied. "He feels bad about how things went, and he wants to make it right. We want you to come to dinner this weekend. His parents are flying in from Palo Alto, and he wants you to meet them officially as family." My throat tightened. "Sarah, I need to tell you something," I said. "Can it wait?" she asked. "I'm actually at the office helping Marcus with investor follow-ups. It's been crazy since the launch. 3 more VCs want to meet with us next week." I told her it was important. "Is it about Marcus?" she asked. "Because, Dad, I really need you to try with him. I know he's different from what you're used to, but he's brilliant and ambitious, and he makes me happy. Can't that be enough?" I wanted to tell her everything right then, but I could hear the hope in her voice, the plea for me to just accept this and be happy for her. And I thought about how hurt she would be when this all came out, how betrayed she'd feel, and how she might blame me for not warning her sooner. "Dinner sounds good," I heard myself say. "Text me the details." I hung up and immediately called Patricia Chan back. I told her we needed to move faster and that the cease and desist should be sent before the weekend. The letter was sent to Marcus Webb and Velocity Analytics on Thursday morning. By Thursday afternoon, Sarah's phone had been ringing off the hook. By Friday, tech blogs were running the story. By Saturday, 3 of Marcus's investors had pulled their funding commitments. Sarah didn't call me and she didn't text. For 3 days, there was just silence from her end while I watched the story unfold online. The evidence was damning. Side-by-side code comparisons, documentation showing the original development timeline, and testimony from developers who'd contributed to the project. Marcus's own statements claiming proprietary innovation made it clear this wasn't an innocent mistake. Tech Twitter was merciless. The think pieces wrote themselves. They talked about the dangers of move fast and break things culture, why open source licensing matters, and the Stanford MBA who forgot about intellectual property. On Tuesday, a week after the launch party, my doorbell rang at 9 o'clock in the evening. It was Sarah. Her eyes were red, her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she was wearing sweatpants and one of my old UT Austin sweatshirts I'd given her years ago. "Did you know?" she asked. "At the launch party, when you left early, did you already know?" I stepped aside to let her in. She walked past me into the living room, the same living room where she'd done homework at the coffee table, where we'd watched movies on Friday nights after her mother died, and where I'd taught her to play chess when she was 7. I told her I suspected it and that I confirmed it that night. "And you didn't tell me," she said. I asked her if she would have believed me. She sank onto the couch. "No, probably not," she admitted. She was quiet for a long moment. "He's been lying to me about everything," she continued. "The code, the investors, even his parents. Did you know his dad isn't a venture capitalist? He's an accountant in Palo Alto. His mom's a teacher." Marcus made up this whole background because he thought it sounded better. I sat down beside her, careful to maintain some distance, unsure if she wanted comfort or just someone to talk at. "The lawyers say he's going to lose everything," she said. "The investors are suing him for fraud. The open commerce developers might press criminal charges. And she stopped and swallowed hard. I moved in with him, Dad. I left my apartment. I've been helping him pitch to investors, using my firm's resources, my contacts, people I've worked with for years, and now they all know I was part of this. I told her she didn't know, but she said it didn't matter. That's not how it looks, she said. My boss called me in yesterday. They're evaluating my involvement, which is corporate speak for you're probably fired. I'm sorry, sweetheart, I said. Are you? She asked. She turned to look at me directly, her eyes searching mine for a truth she wasn't sure she wanted to find. You exposed him, she said, her voice trembling. You're the one who contacted those developers. I saw your name in the legal filings. David Harper, research librarian. Initial source of evidence. I didn't blink as I confirmed it. Yes, that was me. So, she asked, the bitterness sharp in her tone, are you sorry, or are you just glad you were right about him? It was a fair question, perhaps the most important one she had ever asked me. I'm not glad, I said carefully, choosing each word with the precision of a scholar. I am not glad that you are hurting. I'm not glad your career is being dragged through the mud. I'm certainly not glad that Marcus turned out to be the kind of man who would lie to your face. But I am not sorry for what I did. It was the right thing to do. She let out a hollow laugh, one devoid of any real humor. He stole some code, Dad. That's what this is all about. Some code that was free anyway, that anyone could have used. I shook my head. Not like that, I countered. Not by claiming it as his own original work. Not by raising millions of dollars from investors based on a blatant lie. But you didn't have to be the one to report it, she snapped. You could have let someone else figure it out. I looked her in the eye. No one else was going to figure it out, Sarah. I am probably one of a dozen people in this entire city who would have recognized exactly what Marcus did. This is my life's work. I trace information. I verify sources. I understand how intellectual property lives and breathes in the digital age. I saw something fundamentally wrong, and I had the knowledge to prove it. So what? You're a hero now? She asked, pacing the room. You saved the tech world from the big bad man? No, I told her quietly. I'm just a man who couldn't ignore the truth once I knew it. She stopped abruptly, her back to me. You don't understand what you've done, she whispered. Everyone in my professional circle knows. They know my boyfriend built a company on stolen code, and they know my own father is the man who brought it down. Do you know how that looks? Either I'm complicit in the fraud, or I'm just stupid. Those are the only two options people see. There is a third option, I said, reaching out to her. That you are someone who was lied to by someone you trusted. That isn't stupidity, Sarah. That's just being human. Her shoulders began to shake. I loved him, Dad, she sobbed. Or I thought I did. Was any of it real? Was I just a useful connection for him? I went to her and put my hand on her shoulder, and for the first time in years, my daughter cried in my arms. Later, as she wiped her eyes with the sleeve of my old sweatshirt, she asked for the ultimate honesty. Did you do this because it was right, or because you wanted him gone? Both, I admitted. I wanted him gone because of how he made you feel like you had to apologize for me and my career. But I only acted because what he did was a crime against a community of developers. That night, she moved back into her old room. I heard her crying at midnight, but I stayed back, knowing she had to process the betrayal on her own. The next morning, over the same breakfast of eggs and toast I'd made her for 20 years, she asked what happens next. You rebuild, I told her. You're 28, Sarah. You have time to move forward. She looked at me, really seeing me for the first time in months. Do you ever regret staying at the library? She asked. Never, I said. I built something that mattered, even if it wasn't flashy. I preserved knowledge. Marcus called me washed up, but he was wrong. She smiled, then a real, genuine smile. I want to learn what you do, she said. I realized Marcus only got away with it because people don't know how to verify the truth. Teach me. And so, we began. Every Saturday at the library, I showed her how to navigate the digital world with integrity. It wasn't the life she'd imagined, but it was a real one. She said one Saturday, her eyes fixed on the screen as she scrolled through an open-source project's commit history. She had become adept at tracing the digital breadcrumbs that most people ignored. Marcus was right that you taught me something, she remarked, her voice quiet but steady. It just wasn't what he thought it was. I looked up from my own monitor and asked her what she meant. She turned to me, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips. That real strength isn't about being the loudest person in the room, or the flashiest, or even the most confident. It's about being thorough. It's about being honest and being someone people can actually trust. You spent 37 years building that reputation, Dad. That's worth more than any startup valuation could ever be. I didn't trust myself to speak for a moment. Hearing those words from her felt like a lifetime of quiet dedication had finally been seen. Also, she continued, her grin widening into something more mischievous, I'm pretty sure you could run circles around most of those tech bros when it comes to actual technical knowledge. They just never bothered to ask because they couldn't see past the library desk. I chuckled, leaning back in my chair. Well, I told her, I do try to maintain an air of mystery. She laughed then, and the sound of it filled the quiet corners of the library. It sounded like home. 6 months later, Sarah landed a job at a prominent digital rights organization. She works on open source advocacy and licensing compliance now, using the research skills I taught her every single day. She's happy, but more importantly, she is herself again. The polished, hollow version of my daughter that Marcus had tried to create is gone. We had coffee last week, and she told me about a new case she was working on involving another startup that had violated GPL terms. I thought about you, she said, stirring her drink. I thought about how you could have just let Marcus get away with it to keep the peace. You risked our entire relationship to do the right thing, even when it was the hardest choice you've ever made. I don't know if I ever told you this, but that takes a kind of courage I'm not sure I have. You have it, I told her firmly. You proved that by walking away from him, by rebuilding your life from scratch, and by choosing work that actually matters over work that just pays well. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I learned from the best, she whispered. As I sit here now in my office at the library, surrounded by nearly 4 decades of accumulated knowledge and connections, I think back to what Marcus said at that dinner all those months ago. He talked about being restless, about always looking for the next challenge and the next big disruption. He was right that I stayed in one place, but he was fundamentally wrong about what that meant. I didn't stay because I lacked ambition or because I was afraid of the world outside these walls. I stayed because I was building something that mattered. Every database I organized, every researcher I helped, every student I taught to verify a source or trace a line of information that was all part of something much larger than myself. It was a foundation. It was a legacy. Marcus built his entire company in 18 months, and it collapsed in 2 weeks because it was built on sand. I built my career over nearly 40 years, and it is still standing. It is still helping people. It is still making a difference in a world that is increasingly drowning in misinformation. And my daughter, the most important thing I ever built, she is standing too. That is what Marcus and people like him will never understand. Real strength isn't measured in how fast you rise or how much venture capital you can attract. It's measured in what remains when the lights go out, the hype dies down, and everyone stops watching. My name is David Harper. I am a research librarian, and I wouldn't trade what I do or the life I've led for all the venture capital in Silicon Valley. The strength of what you build depends entirely on the integrity of your materials. I have always used the very best, and in the end, the truth was the only tool I ever needed to protect what I loved. My daughter is home, the archives are secure, and the record is finally set straight. Sometimes, the quietest lives are the ones that leave the deepest marks.